Hello, welcome to the first official episode of what I'm titling the Drive Podcast. So I've been recording these for a little bit now, started back in June of 2024, just trying to get in the habit of it, see what it would sound like, get the audio as good as I could get it for, the space available. And I think I'm happy enough with where it is. It's at least listenable. I've listened to worse. And I'm a little bit more comfortable with just talking. Hopefully not rambling too much. Hopefully being able to enunciate to the point that you can understand me. So what is this? Who am I? Let's go over who I am and then the purpose of this podcast. Why am I doing this? So my name's Brandon. If you are watching this, you probably already know me. Maybe someday in the future people will stumble across this, but I'm sure as it starts out, it's just going to be friend group if anybody seeing these. But my name's Brandon. I'm currently 44. I'm a father, a husband, a jiu-jitsu purple belt, a former Marine, and I was raised with homeschooling. So I've got an odd background. Maybe not quite the same as everybody else. Have some different hobbies, some different life viewpoints. But about 10 years ago, say 2015-ish, I was at a point where I wasn't really happy with who I was. I'd been heavy drinking for a while. My family does have a history of alcoholism. I don't think that I succumbed to that, thank goodness. But it was getting to the point where alcohol was not serving me. I was starting to serve it. It was not a healthy relationship. It was affecting how I interacted with my family, and just I didn't like who I was. When I was drinking, but in general. So I did some self-examination. I cut some emotional ties with my past relationships, with where I had lived before, with just different things in my life that I've been clinging on to that, again, were not serving me well, that weren't a part of my life, that were just holding me back and dragging me down. And the analogy I use in my head is felt like being a truck in the mud, and you're equipped to go through the mud, but it's deep and it's bogged down, and you've got a chain tying you to a tree on the bank. And man, you can go as hard as you want, but as long as you've got that chain, you're not going anywhere. So once I made the decision to just put that stuff behind me, it was like that chain snapped and I could start to make headway. And it was the initial lurch of like, oh, I can get moving. Man, it's not easy. It takes a long time to make headway on things and to change who you are. But once you make the decision, it's possible. And just like a truck in the mud, there's periods where like it definitely didn't feel like I was going anywhere, and I was getting even more bogged down. But I'm at a point now where I've improved myself enough, I've changed enough, I've come to accept myself enough that I feel like I can kind of examine it from a little bit further away and start to learn some life lessons, and maybe turn around and pass some on, or at least share them. I know there are a lot of other people in jiu-jitsu, at least my current, it's a hobby, but it's also more of an endeavor, that are trying to improve themselves. So this is really, the initial audience is designed for the people I know who may be starting jiu-jitsu, maybe earlier in the journey, or who are just trying to figure out life. And you're going to see it through my lens, which is, like I said, unique. Homeschooling is more common now than it was in the 80s, but it's still not the norm. I did serve as a Marine for a 4-year term of enlistment, and I'm old, so I was in during 9/11 and got held over with stop loss. By the time I was supposed to get out in 2003. Stop loss was still going on, so I got held over another, I think it was about 6 months, 7 months. You count the days of your enlistment while you're in. Like, your exact date of your EAS, end of active service. But like that got pushed back, and then terminal leave and stuff. Like, I don't remember what my actual final date on my papers was, but it was the summer of 2003 instead of January. And maybe to give you some perspective on who I am, like one of the first like really adult decisions or thoughts that I remember having, because man, I signed up to be a Marine just to get out of my parents' house and kind of out from under their rule, and really just to be spiteful because I was really at odds with them at the time. I was just a jerk, and I was just kind of like, well, fine, I don't need you type thing, even though I needed them to sign the papers because I was 17. But when we declared war on terror, I remember thinking, that's not a great idea. That's an undefined war that could never end, that possibly could never end. And I remember thinking the Patriot Act wasn't a great idea. And hindsight's 2020. Like, did I think, ooh, that's going to dissolve our civil liberties and lead to horrific misuses of power? No, I didn't think that then. I didn't have enough conception of the world then, but I just remember thinking, like, wow, that's pretty sweeping uh, powers they're giving away right now. I definitely thought it was a bad idea when we renewed it. But that thought of, like, ooh, this is probably not a great choice for how we declare war was one of the early memories I have of, like, an adult decision that was outside of my normal thought process. Because up to then, I'd been raised in a very conservative family, very Christian, very right wing, very patriotic. And I'm still very patriotic. And I definitely wanted to serve my country. But by the time I had finished my enlistment, I was a very mediocre Marine. Let's not get that twisted. But I had come to the point where I was like, you know what, this is going a direction that I don't necessarily think is just. And hey, I was at a different point in my life. I was married to my first wife at the time, and I was just ready to move on. I was not a great fit with the military, even though I loved it, got more out of it than I can even enumerate. But there was just a direction going at that time that I wasn't a big fan of. This was back during, if you're younger than me, this is back during the period of weapons of mass destruction, coming up with excuses to go into Iraq. Do I think it was a bad thing to take out Saddam Hussein and his regime? No. Do I think we had just reasons for going there? Hindsight says we didn't really have it. But that kind of gives you an idea of who I was back then, and I've grown since then. I've become a lot more centrist in my views. I was very us versus them, and just take whatever conservative values, stereotypes you might want to think of, and throw those on me at the age of 20 or so. That was probably me. And now I'm very much more compassionate to the people around me. And I actually attribute a lot of that to the military as well. I grew up in Maine, which was very, my area was very rural, and because I was homeschooled, I wasn't exposed to a whole lot. It was a very just, you don't get much whiter for a state than that when I was growing up. There's much more diversity now, but I like to say I knew the one black kid in Maine when I was growing up. His name was Chris. He was a really good guy. But when I got into the military, it exposed me to far more diversity in life and cultures and people, and I really enjoyed that. And then I spent about 10 years living in the South, and that was a whole other experience of culture and diversity. And then I started jiu-jitsu when I got up here to New Jersey, where I currently live. And especially at our school, you don't get much more diverse. It's a very welcoming atmosphere. And so over the last 10 years, I've been trying to change who I was. I kind of accepted like I wasn't happy with who I was, but this is where I'm starting from. I'm going to work to improve myself. And I started listening to podcasts, and I don't listen to most of the same people anymore for various reasons. But the people I was listening to at the time were talking about jujitsu and how amazing it was, and how it was more than just a sport. That sounded really cool to me. And I knew from my time in the military, I did like grappling. I did like, I just got something out of being hands on with somebody else and seeing who comes out on top. Not that I usually won. So when I decided to kind of improve myself, I started looking at jiu-jitsu, and there was a guy named Marcelo Garcia. Was one of the first people I found, one of the big names in the sport. And when you see this guy, he's just like you just see this glowing smile. He is always just very kind and open and happy when he's not kicking your ass in a competition. And I saw him, I was like, I want some of that, whatever that is. I need some of that in my life. And I found that he had a school in New York. That's it. I'm within range of New York. I can visit there. I have visited his school, but it's not a daily occurrence type thing. It's an hour away, train rides, all sorts of stuff. And I'm just not a fan of Manhattan. Kind of grimy. But he had an affiliate school in Princeton run by, it had a pair of owners. Now it's a group of owners, but really the name and the face of it is Emily Kwok. She was a very close student of his, and she very much has Marcelo's outlook on life. Like she's she's a wonderful person, very very vibrant, very charismatic, and extremely knowledgeable. And the first day I trained at Princeton, it was like coming home. It felt right when I found the school. And so that's really shaped a lot of the last 8 years. I came to jiu-jitsu to use it as a framework to explore myself and try to build a better me off of. And I've heard other people pose it as jiu-jitsu can be like a wheel, like it can be your hub, and you can have spokes branching out from it that you actually use out in the world, like that makes contact where the rubber meets the road. And I think that's a pretty accurate example for it too, at least for the way I'm using it. And then the last, wow, almost 15 years, I've been a father, and that was a huge life-changing thing as well. That really, even before 2015, when I started to make big changes, that was the first real wake-up call and change of me from being a dumb 20-something divorced dude just out there partying and drinking to being like, oh, get your shit in order, be a better person. And that's been a wonderful experience. Love my daughter. And that's another reason why I'm kind of trying to enumerate some of these lessons. She might wander upon these some days, and maybe she'll get something out of them. But if nothing else, talking things out really helps me to think. And so I guess that's what is the purpose of this podcast. Now that you know a little about me and my background and like who you're going to be listening to or not. If all that kind of just turned you off, fair enough. Some days I turn me off too. But yeah, why do I do this? Why am I feel like it's time to do this? So a lot of this is inspired because my friend Joe Hannon, who runs the BJ Meditations, BJJ, that's a whole different thing. The BJJ Meditations podcast. Uh, that is a wonderful program. He's a very deep thinker. He is also using jujitsu as a way to approach life, and he, like I said, he's just a deep thinker, and I love his viewpoint on life. I like the way he's examining, and he's very critical and really is able to dig into and take things apart. But we've known each other for well, I guess about 8 years now. That's about as long as I've been training at the school. I met him very shortly thereafter. And when I first saw Joe, I was like, wow, that's somebody I want to get to know. He was wearing a Jocko rash guard at the time, and I was very into the Jocko podcast, and he was very, very stoic. If you meet Joe, he's an extremely nice guy, a lot of fun, great sense of humor, but he comes across as very stoic, very, very, very closed when you first meet him sometimes. And I like that. And having gotten to know him better over the years and having really developed a friendship with him in the last, well, I guess it's like 4 to 5 years. It was about the COVID time frame that we really started to speak more. He and our friend Mehedi had a little 3-man group that we were just, you know, trying to sort things out, jiu-jitsu, life, whatever. And we still had that group, but he was doing something he called raps after training. He would do like a little training log where he would just speak into a recorder and talk things through. And sometimes it was just the technical details of like, hey, this happened in the roll and it was good or bad. But a lot of times it veered off into the lessons you could learn that affected life. And I really dug that. And he spun that into his own podcast. But I've kind of kept that on. And if you train with me, if you're in our school WhatsApp group, like I blather on every day that I train afterwards, just trying to give some thoughts. Sometimes it's real brief, just technical stuff, or here's what I presented in my lesson. But a lot of times it kind of veers off into some life stuff as well. And I really want to dig into that life stuff and see if I can, I don't know, just give people a different perspective. I found podcasts to be very helpful for me in enumerating lessons that I was exposed to in my upbringing, in the military, in life, that I should have learned, but I didn't learn until I actually sought out the lessons. Like here, all the material's been presented to you. You've gone through the school of hard knocks. You didn't learn a damn thing. Now let's go back and have somebody give you the breakdown, and you can actually pick out what you were exposed to and learn the lessons. So maybe possibly I can give you a different viewpoint where you can do that with your own life. And you can kind of either see the similarities or use the differences to analyze what you've been exposed to and how you have addressed it and how you want to address it going forward. And I have basically an hour each direction every day where I'm here with my thoughts. And like I said, talking helps me think through it. Whether you like him or not, Jordan Peterson has been very big in the thinking influencer scene over the last decade. And that's what a lot of his live shows are, is him thinking through something real time, verbally out loud. And I think it's a useful habit. I think I'd like to get into writing more as well. Writing really helps you think. But for now, this is where things are going to start off. And I'm titling it The Drive, yes, because we're driving, but also because that's something I don't see a lot of people having in life right now, especially in Western society, especially in America right now. There's a lot of people that seem to be drifting and just waiting for somebody to show them the way, or waiting for somebody else to come along and make their dreams happen. And in my experience, at least, that doesn't happen. You have to have some kind of drive to go after what you want. You may not know how to get there. That's perfectly fine. But you have to have an idea that you want something more, and you have to be willing to go after it. And that's something Jiu-Jitsu has also helped me develop. I have competed a few times at white belt, and then just started competing again this past year at purple belt. And we'll talk about what those things are in some future podcast. But that competition, like, I don't enjoy competition, but it's an extremely useful tool and incredibly valuable. And you have to have some drive to get in, to get on the mats, to get into that situation and really try to win. And I think developing some of that drive, tapping into whatever that primal thing is, because if you compete, you feel it. It is strange, the mindset you get, the feeling that you tap into. I have a losing record in competition, but I come out feeling just a deep connection to something ancestral. And I think that helps strengthen the drive to go after what you want. Kind of a chicken and the egg thing, but it's there. So yeah, we'll be exploring that too. And maybe you can tap into some of my drive. Maybe you can find some of your own. Who knows what's going to happen? So this is the initial drive podcast. From here on out, they'll probably be a bit more themed about like, hey, I've been thinking about this week. It'll probably be about a weekly release schedule, maybe sometimes a bit more. I've got a fair number of them in the bag from prior to deciding to make it the Drive podcast and exactly what my theme would be. I might release some of those in a separate playlist. They're not quite as well thought out, maybe, but they might be worthwhile. They'll at least be fun to look back on at some point with me calling it something else and just kind of rambling on. I will probably put this up this week. I might film another one between now and then, just so there's always one in the pipeline. But yeah, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy this, and I'm looking forward to going on this drive with you. Oh, get ready for the puns. All right, take care.